Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Now, this is rounding off the First Timers series, and I have my coach and very good friend, Big Tom, back on the pod. He is in, and we're going to be talking about your first off season, but there's going to be a lot of crossover like the rest of the series where there's going to be seasoned competitors listening, and Tom and I both being in the same scenario. And we've certainly had many talks about our own physique development journeys and actually, how you can get into the sport and then keep going and then sometimes lose your way. But it's like your habitual pattern that you compete, you do an off season, and then it's like sometimes maybe you need that reminder of, okay, so what are you now doing it for? Are you still progressing and all of this type of thing? Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, off season's a difficult sort of thing for people to kind of find balance in, isn't it? It's difficult to navigate. It's kind of like when you really still need to be like adherent to the letter and almost still in prep mode, is probably for 4 to 6 weeks post show. And that's probably the hardest bit to do that. You'd be eating more, right? But you want to be adherent because if you fuck that bit, that's your whole off season fucked. And then the difficult thing to navigate then is transitioning into incorporating variety, tracking a lot more loosely, not staying in that robotic mode. And now there's different aspects to this because some people thrive or think they thrive, on ticking all of these boxes, that they might be more comfortable there. I'm not sure. Thriving's it's a big word, and sometimes we don't know what good looks like because we've never been there. But I would say that a productive off season should require consistency and definitely a quality eating pattern. But I tend to pull away from to the letter weights and measures. I don't like weighing stuff. I tend to go by pack sizes. I have that luxury with the food volume I'm on. But a pack of beef is 2 servings. My rice cooker comes with a cup. It's 125 gram of dry weight rice. So I'm just going in, cup measurements there, and that kind of thing. Just portioning sort of related to packet sizes and things like that works for me, but it's consistent. So I'll follow the same eating pattern until maybe I fatigue out of a meal, and then I'll adjust it slightly. The fundamentals of how I make that meal plan are always going to be my fats comprised of healthy fats, my carbs are digestible, high quality, proteins high quality. Like, that's not hard to do. That's not hard to achieve. But when sometimes you can get in a post-show cycle of like binge and restrict, because straight after the show you did 3 back-to-back 12,000 calorie days, and now you're trying to drop fluid, blood pressure's through the roof, collateral fattening setting in, and you restrict, and then a binge happens again. There's all sorts of like psychological playouts from getting that first few days post-show incorrect. It's harder on the girls because a cookie dealer for you hits harder than it does for a 20-stone male. Simple as that. Yeah, it's certainly like, oh God, unwinding out of the kind of like overwhelming sympathetic drive that you can get into with prep, with stimulants. Like, I don't want to use clenbuterol in preps. I don't want to use trenbolone in preps. Like, I'm a goal-driven person. That's put me into what I would describe as almost like a prep psychosis in previous preps. And I say it's part of who I am and my makeup. But what I'm saying is I'm enough like that already. If I add to that, it becomes a psychosis, anxiety around any fucking change in a routine that I've determined ultimately in the confidence that it will work as long as I do exactly that every fucking day. And that tends to accumulate. I tend to add to that. I accumulate more. So, being in that space, I mean, I wouldn't want to go that far there again, but also not being able to pull out of it or just coming to like a hard stop, you completely burned out and then you feel lost, depressed, directionless, or you just continue with it and you carry that drive on into like eating and pushing your off season and again burning yourself out after 4 weeks. So it is a really tricky space to navigate as prep is.
With what you've spoken about there, it's almost like that autonomy that is praised in bodybuilding, right? So we learn the habits, we then get into a structure in a prep. And I speak from experience. I feel like autonomy, actually, for me, similar to you, unleashed like a psychotic prep person in prep, in off season, all the time, and the aliphatic load that would build up every single day because I had to do everything exact. That actually autonomy worked in the opposite direction over time for me. And I, as you know, was not then able to, you know, it's very difficult to find happy medium and do things like not track every single item of food or not weigh every bit of food, etc. So it's certainly finding that sweet spot and working with a coach open and honest and, you know, responding to your personality essentially.
By autonomy there, you mean kind of like repetitive, robotic, uncompromising mindset. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I had to write a list of things post my previous shows to kind of adjust my mindset. I've been working with Rob Latty, who's brilliant. One of the things was just simply start saying yes, because and that was a pandemic prep, so the shows kept getting postponed. You think I locked into that for like 10 months. So this dramatically shifted my psychology, and I needed like some healing time for that. But I've just gotten to the point where, because everything was a non-negotiable, any suggestion, no, no, I don't want to. And I'd catch myself and I think maybe I would, like, actually I do want to do that. You know, like I've already said no. You know, it was like my default response was no. So I had to kind of like rewire and reprogram that. So like my default response being yes, to be happy, because ultimately I can say yes to pretty much everything within my value set and what I enjoy without it compromising my bodybuilding. I don't drink, so you know that's not one that I have a hard time with. I can pretty much eat in any restaurant and make it work within my calories. And just learning to go to a restaurant and order off the menu, you don't have to go mental. You can probably have starter, main, and dessert. It's probably going to be fine. You know, if you're my size, you like, I can go to a restaurant and I can mindfully pull the calories down below what would be my normal macros. If I pick a clear soup and a steak meal with vegetables, and then I might have a coffee instead of dessert. You know, like I can go anywhere and do anything. Just understanding that like I can make that work. And why do I train? Because I really enjoy it. It should be a highlight of my day, not a source of anxiety. I want to feel well after I've done it. Not, I mean, I don't feel well after leg day. I'm not going to lie. But,
Yeah,
but the rest of the time, I know. And your coach gives you like 3 a week. So he's such a dick. Ruins your life 3 days a week. No, I mean, we've got that pursuit of progress.
Yeah.
And what does that require? It requires effective training, right? Sufficient intensity to force adaptation in the body parts you want to grow. And then we want to maintain a certain degree of fitness to be happy and healthy and well. So that might involve moving. And if you can't, you know, it's the weather's not nice, you don't enjoy going out for walks, that's not your jam, then you might be doing gym-based cardio, but it could be dancing or horse riding or ice skating or golf or whatever. Like we get locked into these things, like, and I'm going to do an hour of cardio a day. Well, on the recumbent bike, like the most boring scenario for doing cardio, that's not necessary. So, okay, we want to be like moderately active, train fucking hard, and then eat well to support that training. It's like as simple as that. We don't have to eat like assholes to get big. We don't have to pay attention to what social media appears to be telling us. It's generally a different story. You meet people in person, you know, yeah, I don't really do that.
No, honestly, I've spoken about this on the pod before. When you meet people in person, and actually Emma was on the pod and Rob was like, they ain't doing what they say they're doing. And Emma was like, oh, they fuck. But actually, this being, you know, a pod about your first time off season, being led by what other people are doing is certainly something that is worth us talking about, because also, you know, my thoughts around PED use, particularly in the female realm. I don't see many females talk about the PED use. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that you need to list what you're taking and everything else, but for a first timer that's maybe natural, you know, people that are using PEDs and they're maybe experienced in the sport, they can potentially have a lot more food. They may be doing very different things to negate that. But you see a snapshot on Instagram and it's very hard not to compare, right?
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, if you're using PEDs, it's going to be a very different off season, and it'll take. I mean, as you found, with you sustain great body composition, you've just never lost it, and you can't now. You can't accidentally blow up. You have to intentionally go and do that, and it'll take you time, and you probably wouldn't get very far before your appetite killed you off. At this point, your hormonal profile wasn't tanked because it was supported. I'm talking sex hormones there, and you know, we gave you, you know, downtime. We just effectively set you like a normal baseline, and you kept that normal baseline throughout your prep as well. So this is not going to happen in a natural competitor. So they need to recover their hormonal baseline, but sometimes there's a bit of pressure from the coach. Right, with the girls, we've got to get your period back as fast as possible. That is the number one priority. And that's also not going to be super healthy if you just push body fat up rapidly, right? So there's that balance. So allowing that to come back naturally. And I think yours was back in month 1. So again, like okay, absolutely fine. You weren't, in fact, you were still exotically lean when you got your period back.
Yeah.
So that was just driven by increases in food mitigating stress. Really, we jumped straight back up to maintenance calories, should we say? Like what we defined it as, pretty much nailed that, and then added food every single week for like 6 months.
Yeah.
Not a lot of food, guys.
Yeah,
every week for 6 months to a peak of, I think it was 3,500 calories, something like that, 500 grams of carbs anyway. Remember that being your peak. And obviously, since you've been in Thailand, things we've had to sort of be a bit more reactive to different stresses and stuff. And it's been a different period to navigate where we've not been focused on physique progress, and yet we've had an outcome of incredible physique progress.
Yeah,
after it all, because all the job was, you know, I suppose what was probably holding you back from progressing would have been chronic pain and all the stress associated with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for a natural, again, I'd still do the process the same. You know, I'd want them eating well to maintenance, training, pulling out as much stress as possible, not keeping in unnecessary cardio, and yet not afraid to accumulate a little bit of body fat, especially that initial fluid shift. The first couple of weeks can be a bit of a head fuck.
Yeah.
But just to train through that and keep consistently eating, but not a crazy amount. You don't need to be in a surplus. You just need to hit maintenance, and then start to creep that up so that because you start training more, you're training harder, you start building muscle again, creating new demand. You need more food for that, and just creeping that up over time. So there's always this normalization period, and you can't normalize your appetite regulating hormones with 3 really high calorie days. You'll know it. Your stomach will be painfully full, and you're still getting hunger signaling. You can only wait for the hunger signaling to calm down, and in the meantime, not be in a deficit. It's not going to get better if you binge and then restrict. You're just going to have chronic hunger signaling. It's just never going to normalize. You need to eat well for long enough that it calms down. We tracked that with you. It was like hunger and how you're feeling, just as a rating out of 10. Yeah. And we weren't expecting to be at 10 after 1 week. It was like, yeah, I'm about a 4 after week 1. Now I'm about a 5. I'm about a 6. And it was creeping up. You know, every week with more food and more time, you were less hungry and you were feeling better. And I know you have a good appetite anyway, so there's always, you're never going to report that you can't eat, but in fact, we had that conversation actually. I was like, yeah, you'll probably tap out when like appetite dies, and we still won't be fat. But in our experience, your appetite's never died. So.
Actually, I was talking to a client earlier about this on her check-in, and she's actually in off-season. She requested a podcast around post-show, and this is obviously what we're talking about now. And I said, you know, I have capacity, and really I can eat a meal, and then I think it almost spikes my hunger a bit after eating. So similar to you, like I can do fasted stuff, not really bother about food. Then when I eat, I'm like, I probably could eat more now. And then it sort of dies down, then I have my next meal. But what you said there, I really like, because it's how I coach. When I see the hunger rating, so like you say, like a 1 to 10, when I see that start to be like, okay, so the athlete's a bit more hungry, we're in off season now. And it's not hunger like in a prep, right? But they're more hungry. So that would suggest that training performance is, increasing, and maybe there's more capacity for food. But I like to hold it there for at least a couple of weeks, see if it's just, an anomaly or the period's there or something like this. See if the hunger's still there, see if they're training well before the food pump goes in. Because like you said there, people think you need to be in this massive surplus, but actually maintenance or just above, you can really, really work well on accruing muscle tissue.
Yeah, I mean, I came out of one show on a set about eating like a strongman diet. It's like ate for like 10,000 calories a day, 10 whole eggs for breakfast, fucking half a loaf of rye bread, pack of smoked salmon, and I cranking on. And I'm not gonna lie, like the first 20 kilos went on pretty easy. I was like really full. I felt, I had a bit of cankle going on. I couldn't deny the pump, but then that just quickly deteriorated. And I was just like, soft. Like, okay, yeah, just learned, I suppose, over time. And I think the more muscle you have, the easier it gets. You like big pros that's holding on to so much muscle. It's almost fighting to hold on to that. They don't struggle so much in prep. They don't rebound. If they went and had 10,000 calorie days, it probably barely put them in a surplus. They're just refeeding at that point. Like totally different scenario when you're hypermuscular. And that's what I found over time. It's increasingly difficult for me to gain body fat, even when I'm on high amounts of food and I feel softer. What Joe and I find is if we remove that food, just go down to like 3,500 calories, I drop off nearly 2 stone in fluid and food volume, and I'm really quite lean. And people are like, oh my god, you get shredded fast. It's not right. Maybe the first 2 weeks, After that, I'm into the, if I'm lucky, the third week I'll get 4 pounds off, and then it'll be 2 pounds, and you're fighting for a pound, and it gets harder. This body gets more resistant. But yeah, that kind of like ability to eat well or eat large volumes of food like consistently and not get fat, that to me is a byproduct of being hypermuscular. So if there's any message as well to take away how you're approaching your off season, we want to be accumulating muscle and baseline maintenance calories as much as possible in that time. And if you're extremely low to begin with, like that, you're looking at a long off season. I want to be prepping a girl that's on 3,500 to 4,000 calories and not fat, right? So that's the ideal start point, right? I'm not ever going to start somebody on a diet that's maintenance is 1,500 calories. They might have 20 kilos to lose. I will not do that. I'm going to maintain their weight and try, in this scenario, I want to get some muscle building going on. So they might be into the world's longest recon as they undo years and years of yo-yo dieting. Could be the next 5 years. They're just focusing on weight training and accumulating muscle mass and eating to that demand. Because throughout that time, that 1,500 calories will be creeping up. As long as they stick to whole foods, they're not going to accumulate any unnecessary body fat. As long as they do what you say, which is allow appetite and hunger signaling to creep up, demand from training to creep up, and then meet that demand. You go in these incremental jumps. If that person can get to 2,500 calories as maintenance, they're over the moon usually. And I'm dieting older women. They say, oh, I used to diet on 800 calories. I can't believe that I'm dieting now on 2,000. And we've given them a 500 calorie drop savagely because that's what they were at, just maintaining their weight. So yeah, it's really a mixed bag what you'll get away with in your off season, but it's just linked back to sort of experience and musculature. And I don't particularly desire anything post show now. I start building it up in my head. It's always external messaging anyway. They're not my ideas. I know they're not my ideas, but in the off season, I never think, oh, I'll have a triple cheeseburger. I don't want it. I'd rather go for sushi or something that I enjoy and feel good afterwards. I don't want Ben and Jerry's. I like nice gelato, digest well, but I don't. Ben and Jerry's is like really, really sweet to me in the off season. I don't like a lot of sweet. I don't like even that much sauces and stuff in the off season. In prep, we build those things up, and yeah, I think like if you're true to yourself, it's not really the way that you like eating. That's external messaging. And the world's smart at that, isn't it? I used to finish my gym, drive past the KFC board and McDonald's board, and then like Pizza Hut, Nando's, one of them retail parks. To finishing training, hungry, trying to just soak in that information. And that year was the most times that I had McDonald's and KFC and stuff ever. And they're not normally on my radar. I normally reject them out of hand. It was 10 years ago. And that was post show. It'd be 10 o'clock at night, I'd be tired and find myself just pulling into McDonald's because I'd started to create that habit of going.
Yeah. And also it's almost awarded as a treat and, this sort of thought process. So as a child, we speak about this, you go to McDonald's as a treat, or, your parents say, oh, you've done really well. Let's go for a meal.
Advertising targets kids. It's not nice, is it?
No, but also if you have these thought processes sort of built into you as a child. Now, I was quite lucky in respect that we didn't really have much money growing up. So like a treat or a takeaway would be literally like once in a blue moon. And it was like, it might be the local Indian or something. So I'm not saying that you want to have Indian every weekend, but it's sort of almost a little bit more, you can gain some nutrition from that, having some chicken, some veggies and whatever, and maybe some rice. And that was really nice to sit down and watch a movie with the family. And it helped me facilitate what memories would be. Now, I've spoken about this on the post-show pod, and I'd quite like to hear your take on it. Now, before I got into bodybuilding, I had no food pathologies, no issues around food. I'd eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever. Of course, I didn't have a physique like I do now, so that's the big thing there. But I feel like almost over my time, from what I see on social media and the people that I was associating with and seeing them do as competitors, I almost built into this like, well, I should be eating these foods. And yes, I did do that. I'm fully aware that I did it, but I feel like that was such an impact on me.
We learn from our peers.
Yeah.
Sometimes our peers are putting out bullshit information because they can.
Yeah.
With social media, and that's something I think is nothing new to the fitness industry.
Right.
It's always been a case of putting out bullshit information. So bodybuilding is generally comprised of eating a high protein whole foods diet, taking steroids and training for hypertrophy 5 or 6 days a week. And but the fitness industry will tell us everything apart from that. That's quite boring. And for people that aren't willing to take steroids, they don't really want to hear that, do they? Someone be an over-the-counter supplement that's got a guy on the front of it that takes steroids, advertising it. Celtec was the ultimate. Celtec was creatine and sugar. I had it. It was £70 for a kilo tub, and they told you to front load it. If you have like 20 grams of this, you get through it quicker. It's creatine and sugar, 70 quid. And that was probably 2 decades ago. So you're probably talking like 150 quid for a pot of creatine and sugar now. And they were making bank that. So yeah, we know this, and we do need to be resistant and kind of find our own line. But we also learn from our peers. So it's just important, like, that you have the right peer group. That's always been true as well. And why do food pathologies crop up anyway? One of the aspects of that is just we're learning, right? So there's a really cool study where they got like a group of fitness professionals, and they attached some electrodes to their frontal lobes, and they got a group of sedentary people who were also obese and did the same thing. And then they basically fed them and just measured the brain activity. And what happened was that the people that were sedentary and obese probably didn't have any sort of food pathologies as we would define them. If they're obese, they've got some eating problems, but they registered like no frontal lobe activity. There was like zero information registered other than that there was like food in front of them that they were going to eat. With a fitness professional, they're lighting up like crazy with information. So they don't have Fitness Pal to hand or anything like that, but they're logging in their head, high in protein, estimated grams of protein, good fiber source. I'm not eating that. That's bullshit. You know, all of these things are going on. So, of course, in that process of learning and acquiring information, you might find that you're also picking up, you know, food pathologies around that because you're just becoming very switched on to what's going into your body. So you have to almost relax on that a little bit and just rely on, you know, the principles. I want to put in foods into my body that serve me. I also know that sometimes putting foods into my body for enjoyment won't hurt, right? It won't. But the majority of the time, I want to eat foods that serve me. And what does that look like? I've got a broad set of principles. So what, for me, that means I'm getting in sufficient quality protein. I want a good amount of different fiber sources from fruits and vegetables and whole grain carbohydrates. I want to top up my carbohydrates with easier ones like white rice. And I'm also going to hammer my healthy fats, you know. So that's the way that I eat. So if I'm presented with no plan, I just have to assemble a meal, I'm like, where's my healthy fat? Where's my protein source? Where's my carbohydrate source? Where's my fiber? And that serves me. That always serves me. Yeah, maybe post show when appetite's high, I was making those same choices that I'd maybe make myself a larger plate of food than if I'm at off season and I don't really want to eat. But I'm not really going to harm myself eating that way. Not significantly. I'm not going to get into this rapid collateral fattening, fluid issues and stuff like that. So I do think that doing what we do creates an unusual relationship with food. I think that it can serve us, and I think it can be really harmful as well if we get into, and a lot of that's just awareness and listening to people who've had, your podcast is great because all these people who've had these experiences. I remember going on the OPD podcast and we were talking about extreme sort of eating disordered behavior that we've come across and experienced in ourselves. And it was like, oh my God, I've done that too. Oh my God, like me and Austin were having this back and forth where he's like, you know, and I stamped my foot so hard because I was just trying to find pain instead, you know, something to get rid of the hunger and, you know, all these kind of different things. And we we're like, oh my God, I'm like, we're encouraged. I mean, we're men anyway, but we're encouraged to kind of like not talk about those things that are going on prep, or just get my head down, get on with it. Prep's easy. Yeah, I have no problem. So no, I drive past things I want to eat. I have to tell myself, you know, I have to be hungry. Sometimes that's distracting. Sometimes that makes me less than my greatest self. It's probably the best I can be in that moment, but I'm diminished as a person, you know. So there's a lot of things going on that, you know, that kind of like dialogue around food. So I think it's important to strip it back to some good principles that serve you, and then kind of forget the minutia as you move into off season, you know. And that's what I mean about like weighing and measuring everything. You've got to drink this exact amount of water that's arbitrary. You've got to take this amount of salt that's arbitrary. It's not reflected in changes in your day at all, or your physiology, you know, or your changing body over time. Like we set up so many non-negotiables. Everything has to be this way. My routine has to be this way. Yeah, I think that's probably what drives the majority of these food-focused pathologies that we come across.
Yeah, I certainly, with what you say there, agree with keeping an element of structure there. So not going, you know, from prep where it's your whole day is sort of, it has to be boxed off, right? Because you've got your list of tasks, to then, you know, like you said, you don't need to go and sit on a bike for an hour. But again, it's something I mentioned before on a previous podcast where you could go for a walk for an hour with your partner, maybe. Or, you know, you could do something at home that you haven't really had the capacity for in prep. Or, you know,
on that Nintendo Wii.
Yeah, but just having some structure there, that helps mentally, but allowing yourself to come away from, you know, the majority of the things that lead us to stage at the tail end that, like you say, you don't need to do excessive cardio, etc. Now, when we talk about the binge restrict cycle, so this is certainly something that's on the peripheral. It's very, very common. I don't know if it's more in the female side of the sport, but that's what I hear of it more.
The men binge, but they probably don't restrict as hard. And some of them will get into that cycle. But again, they've got that muscularity to get away with it a bit, and there's less pressure on them to look good. If I put on 20 kilo, everyone just says I look big in the gym.
Yeah.
If I drop 20 kilo, everyone says I look ripped in the gym. You know, whatever's going on with me psychologically, oh, I'm fat, I'm small, I'm flat, I'm getting positive reinforcement the majority of the time. Females won't be getting that. So that's one part of the narrative. So they've got that pressure to not get fat. So the binges have happened. You know, you've built up this fucking stockpile post show. You've made yourself feel sick eating through it all, full of regret, because yeah, it was fun for a minute. Then the drive to eat just kicked in, and you realise you can't stop. You feel out of control, and you feel horrible the next day. So you're like, what was the last thing that I was successful with? What do I know? My prep meal plan from like 1 week out. All right, I'm just going to go back to that one day. But that was driving the appetite regulating. So just drop back into a deficit. And then now we start getting into like unplanned binges. You know, they just seem to just happen. You get triggered and off you go. Then you have to restrict again. So you never reach homeostasis. And a lot of bodybuilders, I think, never ever, well, they're always so far away from homeostasis, they're never happy. Do you know, I'm either hungry or feeling sick from food, you know, just oscillating between that. And usually the net outcome in physique development that across a year, where it's like aggressive bulk followed by aggressive cut, there's usually no progress. Yeah, I do think that, you know, the binge eating disorder is probably created by prep diet and just not knowing how to exit that, really. Like, let's say you've got a competent coach. You should know your post show plan before you've done your show.
Yeah.
And that should look like a good quality menu that you can eat for a week. And your coach shouldn't be saying really to you, right, go out and eat whatever the fuck you want. It doesn't matter. Just let yourself go. But your coach should be educating you and saying, look, it's likely that you're going to get triggered by certain foods. I'd like you to avoid them for a few weeks. I know you're going to want some treats and stuff like that, but let's keep them to these principles or something like that. I think with yourself, we checked the kind of like restaurant you were going to. We'd already worked on all of those principles. So you were able to go out a lot, eat out a lot, have a lot more freedom because you still kept it to pretty much a whole foods diet. So yeah, I mean, that's the way to do it. But once you're in it and you've gained fat already, the only way you're getting out of that is to be disciplined with yourself, hit maintenance calories, and accept that you're hungrier than that and go through it for a period of time. But you're not going to lose that body fat. Negotiating with that is just a recipe for misery. Like, you will never get out of that. If you're constantly negotiating with food, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is. Not only mentally, but physically, like you say, if you're not able to reach that point where, you know, you are at homeostasis, obviously what occurs in a prep anyway, if you're pushing for, you know, really lean condition, or even if you're pushing for a leaner condition than you've experienced before, the adaptations that happen to then have that period of time off the back of the show, if things are all over the place, this sort of binge type pattern with restricting, etc., the body is literally like, what the fuck is going on? You know, and you're gonna get a kickback.
Yeah, exactly that. And actually understanding that your body's sending you certain signals.
Yeah.
You've been ignoring them in prep. And some of them post show you need to listen to, like rest, relax, unwind. But some of them you need to also continue to kind of like navigate, like hunger signaling. The key take home I've had after like 10 shows is that post show, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to be hungry as fuck for like 4 to 6 weeks. So I can do that in a way where it's conducive to a good off season. Now, start putting on quality mass right away just by eating well, filling out my connective tissues, hydrating, getting my body in a nice spot to like really push training performance. You need your body fat to be high enough to do that. You know, gaining some weight in the process, but it's not this kind of like rapid onset weight gain. And just knowing that tomorrow I'll be like 5% less hungry. I'm still going to be hungry. But you just have to trust in that process over time, like be firm in your beliefs. I remember being lost post show, like not knowing what I wanted to eat. I'm hungry. I find myself in the grocery store. I'm putting I've only gone to get my tea, but I'm putting in like, I've got like 5 dinners by the time I get home, 5 different options, all bullshit. stuff from childhood as well. I remember picking up like fucking turkey drumsticks from Bernard Matthews and had
Oh,
that in like little all sorts of things, spaghetti hoops, like bullshit. And then I get home. Now I can't decide what of those 5 items that could be considered a meal that I'm actually going to eat.
yeah.
And guess what's going to happen? I'm going to eat as much as I end up eating all of it probably. So it like I need to go into that store to pick up my steak and rice and avocado and a treat because I've decided that I can have a treat every day in my first week post show, whatever, but it's a treat, like a chocolate bar or
Yeah.
a single magnum, not a box.
Yeah.
I'm not buying boxes of ice creams post show. I'll spend the extra money on just getting individual ones, like one at a time. Because if I go home with a box, I'll eat a box. And now in the off season, I'll get a box because I know that if I'm having that off plan meal and the calories that I need, I'm going to eat tonight 2 frozen pizzas and 4 Mars ice creams. To be fair, they're not the size they once were, are they?
Oh God, I know.
I'll sometimes wake up lighter. That's a deep in the off season position. And I also find that I don't want that again for quite some time. And I also find that if it's regular in my diet, I start feeling bad and I don't want to eat that way. So it's just interesting how it flips on its head. If you've been eating well for long enough,
Yeah.
but those things to us, because of our awareness, because we know how they impact the body, because we feel it, they're not appealing anymore.
That like exploration for us to, as a coaching pair, like there's been many light bulb moments this off season where I'm like, and it's not to poo-poo. It's never, when I do share this on the podcast and social media, etc., it's never to go, well, I'm in this spot, and if someone is in a bad spot, oh, they should be like me, because let's face it, it's taken me 12 years to get to this spot, and a different coaching style with yourself, meeting Matt, etc. A lot of learning has been done, but I want to try and share as much as I can to then have hopefully a bit of an impact like this podcast today on people that are doing it for the first time or the fourth time. Now, a good example here is Victoria, who's a client. She's also my best friend. She had her check-in this week. She was like, I had a bit of like a cookie box cookie. And it was unplanned, but my mum fancied it. She had it in the freezer and she decided to have a bit, but she couldn't finish it. And she said, I sat down and I reflected, this time a year ago, she maybe could have eaten 2 or 3, right? And this is her sort of first proper longer off season. And I was like, if I could give that gift to anyone in the bodybuilding community that does struggle with this period, I would, because that mindset, it's something that's taken me 12 years,
Yeah. So let's say that somebody, so now we're giving some people maybe an idea of like how to approach post show if they're coming into that period. But if they've already come post show and they're experiencing problems with their food, okay, the first thing to do there is to like normalize to a quality healthy eating pattern that's sufficient calories to meet your needs. It cannot be below. Now in time, that's normalized, you'll be able to start again maybe more successfully and not experience those food pathologies. And there's other ways around that anyway. Like it's how you diet somebody, particularly if they're enhanced, it's much easier. So and things like semaglutide on the market and stuff like that can almost negate like hunger-driven food pathologies if managed well by the coach. So like there's definitely a way out of that, but it's probably not tomorrow, So you're probably going to have to go through this period. So okay, what's happened is I've learned a lot. I've accumulated some unnecessary body fat. I'm probably holding on to also a fair chunk of fluid and inflammation. And I can take that opportunity back just by eating whole foods. And you probably find after a week that your stomach's smaller, flatter, less inflamed, and that you've dropped quite a bit of fluid. And be like, okay, all right, we're in that. I didn't gain maybe as much fat as I thought I had. I'm still not happy with the amount of body fat I have, because who the fuck is, unless they've got striated glutes in the bodybuilding world? Everyone will tell you you're in great shape, and you're like,
I'm fat.
Right. So, fundamentally, we're attracted to changing our physiques, building our physiques, and everything like that. There does come a time where you look in the mirror and you're pretty damn happy. I'm sure you've found that now. It's like, it's almost like play. Like, like Arnold said, oh, I want a bit more deltoids. Let's do that for a bit, but you're in control of your body. So when you feel like you're out of control with what's going on with your body, if you can just return to like a good quality whole foods eating plan that's sufficient food and give it time and train. So look at powerlifting girls, look at girls who've never ever gone into competition diets, CrossFitters and so on. They are fucked ton of food, clean and dirty, and they train. And often they have great body compositions because what's happened, because they haven't gone into that for weight loss, it's their sport. They've been able, so just like guys that have trained and done sports all their lives and just eaten to demand, no kind of weird relationship with food is set up because they've always been able to eat freely. They've always known that they need to eat well enough to serve their training performance. That's been their number one goal. So if you flip it around, I just want to focus on great training performance and putting foods in my body that serve that and serve me and my well-being, then you'll move away from that pathology. And if you then at a later date want to, take some fat loss and move into that phase, you'll be in a better position to do it because you've gained muscle, you've increased your baseline calories, and maybe you need a different approach to the dieting, but you definitely need a different or a plan to exit that diet as well. So let's say for every 3 training blocks that you do looking to gain muscle and add, like keep improving your training performance, you maybe have 1 little diet block. You're right, that's about the right ratio. And I feel like the majority of the time, especially females, it's the ratio is the other way around. They're probably dieting for 3 blocks and then they fall off the wagon a bit and then they diet again for like 3 blocks. And there's never a sustained focus on training performance and building muscle, not in a meaningful way. Maybe paying it lip service, but not in a meaningful way. Years of consistent lifting and eating well will put you in a position where you have ultimate control of your body.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the first off-season, first prep, it's all new to you, isn't it? And you're going to hear a lot of different mythologies, idealistic approaches, depending on who the coach is. We can be honest here, Tom, people like this from the podcast. We don't need to beat around the bush here. There's some fucking wild protocols and things thrown around from different coaches in our space. And, it's difficult at times because I certainly know from taking on clients from other coaches or friends that have got coaches and they've moved away from them, when they talk about, what the coach is getting them to do and how it's executed, it's pretty crazy. And if you're getting into the sport for the first time, it's your first coach, how would you know? So you've been told to do X, Y, and Z, and you believe that is the right way. Now, if someone's listening and they've done the first season, they've had that reverse out period where you likened it there to they're in the off season, they don't really know what to do. They're in that stage of feeling quite lost, haven't got the coach anymore, maybe are looking to get another coach. Would you give any certain advice around that sort of period of time where you are feeling lost and you haven't got a coach? You've maybe been, tortured in your prep per se.
I think that's like sort of a normal aspect of burnout, right? That a well-managed prep, very well-managed prep shouldn't burn you out totally. But in a lot of cases it will, especially first time around. It can be so attritional. So it's like, well, how would I approach coming out of burnout? I'd take appropriate downtime. I'd allow myself, right? I'd allow myself to feel less driven. I wouldn't fight that. I'd allow myself to have more downtime. I'd allow myself to have more experiences and variety. But I also wouldn't be destructive in my behaviors. And understanding what destructive is, it's a very, very difficult space to like broadly label because everyone's so individual on what they'll thrive off of. But if we can just come back to what basically bodybuilding is, which is it should be fun. It's a healthy lifestyle. It's a hobby. It's about shaping and building your physique using weight training, which presumably you enjoy, right? Don't like weight training, don't do it for a while. See what happens. You might want to go back to it. Again, it can be an aspect of burnout. You don't like eating a bodybuilding plan, 5-6 meals a day, got some kind of fatigue from all of that. Fine, have 1, 2, 3 meals a day. Just make sure they're good quality, and they serve you. Relax. Give yourself kind of like a mental break and a headspace, because you'll pick back up. I don't train balls out post show. I'll go in and get a little pump and pay it lip service. I don't like to eat a lot of food post show necessarily. I let that come with time. The more I train, most thing that I'm doing is sorting myself out mentally. I feel like the mental fatigue far more than the physical. So, as I say, it's different for everybody. You might come bouncing out of your post-show period, fully enthused, really into bodybuilding and all of that kind of stuff. Like, you can run with that as well. Just don't overreach yourself too early. Eat well, train well, but pay attention to your recovery and your downtime. That's probably one thing that, like, prep, there's so much time spent just doing expenditure that we lose the recovery days. So I'm a bit lost. I don't know what to do. I feel like I should be training, but I don't have the energy. I don't really want to. But what else do I do with my time? Recovery, right? Book a massage, go for a sauna, go for an ice bath after the sauna. Look after yourself. As you say, go for a long walk, do some yoga, do some mobility. There's lots of things that you can be doing to kind of support your bodybuilding goals when you're fatigued from training and dieting, just emotionally burned out. They're just easy and they're palatable. So yeah, I've been in different spaces. Post show, I've not wanted to really look at bodybuilding, or I've been galvanized and I want to do it 1,000,000%. And just moderation really. That's the only thing that I think I can say is successful in the long term. That I consistently train, consistently eat well, consistently get my rest, and that's the sort of the lifestyle that doesn't take up all of my day, and I feel pretty good. So I do other things with my time, and that's called balance.
Yeah.
None of those things are destructive. They all serve me. I either enjoy them, they're relaxing, they contribute to my life in some way. It's work, it's personal growth, it's learning. Learning could be a key thing to do post-show. You've had that experience. That's what it felt like for you. That's what it looks like. There's a reflection period, and I start learning from others and finding out about their experiences, maybe seeking out educators or a coach that mentors you, that not just gives you a plan. I might look to expand on my experience with further learning, so that I can make sense of that experience, which is really cool. So I've got 10 years of experience now, and I'm only starting to be able to apply all of my learning. So this was what was going on then. And that's why that was that outcome. And this was another track that I would take now for a different outcome, to know that'd be more successful. And you start stringing these things together, and the net learning is that it's not that hard. Actually, for me, it's just that there are a few basics that I need to do every day in order to be successful with it.
Yeah, I was going to ask your opinion on, now we're sort of on that topic of mental health per se, although we've spoken about it today already, of course, but that sort of that post show and what you feel like in a prep. Now, we've both been there where it's tough in relationships that are close to you, and this really interested me. And Jeff Black does this every podcast he comes on. He says something, and I have to really think about it and process it for a number of weeks. Anywho, he said on the last one, we were talking about when you can have epiphany moments in a prep. So moments where you're like, whoa, I need to change my whole life. And, I've seen the light. And he said to me, he started talking about it, and then he just stopped, and he was like, I don't know what the answer is here. I've never had an epiphany in a prep. And I was like, well, do you think that's just you because you're pretty brutal? But he said, perhaps people aren't working hard enough, and they're not, getting conditioned enough, and they're not depleted enough if they're able to completely change their whole life 3 weeks out from a show. And it got me thinking. Now, I have epiphany moments in preps. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because I keep thinking about that part.
So I've got my experience. So one, you touch a nerve there. You definitely do get overly shredded, in fact, in the last shows, unnecessarily so, but it was fun. So I've never had a realization or an epiphany that's led to growth in a prep. I've got loads of fucking ideas that contribute to my own self-destruction and immolation and unhappiness in the long term. But post-show, that's normally when I have a bit of a growth and reflection period. What have I learned from that experience? I'm able to do that now. I'm simply too tired. And Rob would tell me, don't make decisions when you're like stressed and tired.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're doing prep. So what are you? You're incredibly tired and your body's incredibly stressed. So what I can be pretty sure about in most instances that my prep head doesn't have my best interests at heart, not in the long term. So my prep head, my prep voice is the voice I don't want to listen to. That's why I have a coach. Right? I don't trust my prep head. He's a dick.
Yeah.
Right. So and if I let him run riot, then I'm a dick and the people around me stuff. So post show is a good time for reflection and realizations. And I think the difference with you is you're quite full of empathy, and you're quite curious and you're quite analytical. So I think that sometimes your prep realizations and things like that, they're probably driven by the suffering.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it forces you to take sort of like internal looks and internal reflections, because you're probably one of the people that I work with that's probably like the highest up in terms of their journey towards like self-actualization. And I think it's because of that curiosity, because of that constant seeking of information. And you also, regardless of where you're at in prep, you talk to a lot of people on this podcast. So you kind of continue your learning, and the context will be shifting because of how you feel, how you understand and interpret those things. But you'll still reflect on them. You'll still have ideas. Like I say, my past preps, I've been incredibly sympathetically driven. I'm looking forward to the next ones without clenbuterol and trenbolone, because, I think they drive those kind of like, well, what I would call destructive thoughts, destructive behaviors, because they tend to serve me in the moment in the pursuit of getting leaner, but they don't serve me at all in terms of just being a happy person and having a happy life. And I don't like, you're that tired that you can't really project and understand the outcomes of your behavior then. Essentially, you're living in wreckage. It's wreckage that will come in the future, but that's what you're living in, the wreckage of the future. So you want to be able to kind of like pull back from those kind of like, I think, life-changing decisions, life-changing moments. While you're in that space, just hold off. Don't end your relationship. Don't change your living circumstances. Don't quit your job. Don't do anything until you're in a relaxed and fed space. And then you can properly reflect and just be sure. So I use the term like prep psychosis and things like that, when I'm in that space. That's how it feels to me, like psychosis. I don't feel myself. I feel like an outsider looking in and observing those behaviors when I reflect back on it. I can't even remember, it's so different in the way that I'm thinking and acting when I'm using those compounds. And maybe it's the deficit, but I'm in plenty of mini cuts where I don't use those compounds. I'm absolutely fine. Yeah. So, for me, that's causes, that generates this kind of like element of insanity, insobriety. You're under the influence somehow. Never good circumstances to make life-changing decisions anyway. So maybe I do have epiphanies and, realizations and moments. I don't think I should listen to them because they've not guided me to happiness in the past. My realizations and growth and, decision, all those kind of things, when I'm in a sane headspace, I can listen to those voices. But in prep, I need somebody I trust just to follow their plan and then not do anything radical in my own life.
Yeah. In that reverse out, I like what you said there. I think this is almost becoming a bit of a theme on the podcast where a lot of guests are saying sort of 6 to 8 weeks as a minimum guideline post-show. Again, depending on how lean you got, how many times you've done it, many different factors, but there is this sort of 6 to 8 week window that a lot of people associate with, where, you know, that is that phase where you may not want to be interacting all the time with other people. You may need to just be quiet sometimes. You know, being able to own that and express that to those around you, that can be quite hard. So if there's a first timer listening and they're thinking, fucking hell, you know, I was speaking to everyone and now I'm in the reverse out and I just don't have the energy. I don't want to speak to people. I'm sure you'll align with me that just try and communicate.
If your post showing you're not feeling good and you don't understand why, just Google symptoms of burnout, see if you get the identification.
Yeah.
I guarantee you will. And you'll be like, right, that's what's going on with me. And how do I get out of burnout? Just rest and wait.
Yeah.
Look after yourself. Be kind to yourself means put foods in your body that serve yourself. Get sufficient rest, which may be more than when you're a normal, functionally human being. Think of it like you've been unwell. Put in good foods that serve you. Get yourself well. Rest enough and recover. You need to relax and unwind your body. Training wise, it doesn't need to be attritional, all out contributing to that allostatic load, which is just spilled over and poorly managed by this point in many cases. So, you know, yeah, pull back on training, you know, pull back on socializing if you think, you know, like whatever you need. If you need, I used to work a job where I was exposed to people 100 hours a week. It was horrendous.
Yeah.
I get one day off. I didn't go out. I got up, I showered. I went to, I mean, this would age me, but I went to the video shop and I got some DVDs out. I went to the co-op on the way back and got my food for the day. And I stayed in. And that's all I did, because that was the only thing that I could do, you know, because that week had jaded me. And, you know, actually that accumulated into my first experiences of burnout, being ineffective, feeling incapable, feeling too exhausted, feeling depressed, feeling sad, feeling like you need your lunch.
Your doggy to come and say hello. I think as well, actually tying into this, I'd be interested to know your sort of thoughts around this. So if and when your sex drive drops off, now I've said on the podcast, mine doesn't drop off in a prep. However, a lot of the time people's sex drive will drop off. So if this is the case in your prep, right, and your partner's thinking, what the fuck, you know, are they not interested in me anymore? Maybe you've done your prep and you don't realize how your partner feels, right? You know, they're thinking, what's happened? This person's in a prep. They're not interested in me anymore. And of course, there's many things in a prep that will contribute to your sex drive dropping off. But then if there's a divide created between you and your partner, and it's quite hard to rekindle that, maybe there's a bit of resentment. Do you have any advice from a male point of view that could maybe help you during this?
So you're a man and you fucked your relationship.
Yep.
Through neglect.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So first of all, admit that you've been a dick.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. And similar, you know, sometimes it's people's first exposure to bodybuilding. If I'm drunk and I do something, I'm still accountable. Your partner's not going to accept that it was the drugs or the prep or you chose all those things, right? So you're still accountable. So I'm accountable. That was hard. I'm sorry that was hard on you. It wasn't my intention when I started out. And I really put in the effort to making love intentional. And I don't mean like, you know, like forcing the issue with sex or anything like that. That's probably not going to work if you've been an arsehole for 16 weeks. But make an effort, all right, and prioritize your partner. And as a man, I think you should prioritize your partner full stop. I think that's part of your job. That's just part of my value set. But, you know, prioritize your partner and give it time and not pressure. And don't expect forgiveness immediately. And then, crucially, don't do it again.
Nice.
All right. So if you want that relationship and that's how you were in prep, don't do that again. There's no need for you to prep. Chances are you're not going to be Mr. Olympia. So or be nice about it and let your hostage go, right? And just be on your own and pursue bodybuilding if that's what you want to do. But if that relationship's of value to you, this is what I've learned. Prioritize it or change it. right? Because it's not fair to keep someone hostage, put all the work in, build the relationship back up, only to go into another prep and do it all again. I've done that. I've done that. And I'm not awful in prep, but I do, as I say, enter into this psychosis of I want every day the same. I want my routine and you know, and I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I'm not my greatest self. So if you give somebody your greatest self, you know, for 2 years and then you go into a prep and it completely changes the dynamic, you've changed the dynamic of the relationship. And if they're still with you at the end of it, you better fucking prioritize them ASAP and own your behavior as I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry, but not I'm sorry. I was like that because right. I only did it because I was drunk. Right. This doesn't fly. Accountability stops at I'm sorry, and a change in behavior that's consistent and sustained. That's the only way to recover a relationship that you've damaged.
Do you think that bodybuilding, when you get that identity, can lead to people feeling like maybe they don't want to be with that person anymore because they're so infused by bodybuilding?
Well, this is the nature of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it will happen in relationships if either partner's got a growth mindset. It will not happen in friendship circles. And there'll be lonely periods. When you embark on a journey of growth, before you kind of reach the person you're growing into in that stage, there'll be a lot of change going on around you. And it might be quite lonely because people who knew you, because you've changed the dynamic. And so it's easy to rail, oh, these weren't my real friends. Well, they were when you were the person you were. And, you know, I don't, you know, my family don't support me, but they supported the person you were. So it takes a lot of understanding and communication for you to say, I'm changing the person I am, I'm trying to grow. And some people come with you on that journey. You'll meet new people in that journey, but ultimately we end up sitting in little tribes. So what you're doing is you're leaving one tribe and you're traveling to another. And that bit in between means you're on your own a lot of the time. And that's not very nice. Mm-hmm. But if that person's like, you know, close in your relationship, you're essentially, you're walking away from them. Trying to drag them along doesn't work. It's not fair, is what I'm saying. So if you're with a person who doesn't support bodybuilding, isn't interested, you know, I did this throughout my marriage, just kind of butt heads all the time. You're trying to compromise and make things work, and they're trying to compromise and make things work, and it's draining, and it's not going to work for either partner ultimately. So my experience now would be maybe even if you still care about the person, especially if you care about them, don't inflict further pain. Just remove yourself from the relationship. That's as loving as you can be. And in the future, you might look for a relationship that works. And I think most of us that do bodybuilding, it really only works with other bodybuilders. You know, sometimes with people that are enthusiastic about it, they don't necessarily go through the preps and stuff like that. Depends very much on the dynamic of the partnership, if they're supportive, if they're chilled, if they're laid back, if they're secure, because your lack of attention during prep, it doesn't combine well with insecurity. So there's no like easy answer. You know, if you can prioritize your relationship during prep as much as you're humanly capable of with an understanding partner, and then prioritize them to the max as you should once your competition's done, then that just looks like, okay, my partner did a block of work for good reason, right? There's got to be value at the end of it, for good reason. And now we are focusing on our relationship and growing together again, you know? Yeah.
And that's obviously facilitated in off season, because off season, if you are incorporating off plan and things like this, obviously having more food, you feel better, so you can put more energies in. A slight side note, which we could probably wrap up on with sort of almost external pressure when you go into your post show and off season, when people automatically think, you've done that thing now, we can eat. Now, that is certainly a first timer thing for sure. And for me, throughout the whole time, it's very hard to say no. I found it in the past in off season, but in prep, I'll just say, well, no, I can't. I'm in prep. In off season, it's like, well, actually I can. So right at the start, you were saying about learning to say yes. However, if there's external pressures to go above and beyond, you know, the ways we've spoken about around the food, etc., how would you give advice around that? So being able to say yes sometimes, but no when it's appropriate.
Well, I only do what fits within my value set and what serves me, right? So people are like, they want me to go out drinking. I'm not going. All right. If they want me to go out with them and they're drinking and I want to go, I might. That's fine. And if somebody says to me, why are you not going to, I choose not to. And if they keep at me on that, I'd be like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I've no interest in the conversation. So I'm not going to be pressurized into doing anything I don't want to do. But I do want to understand and be aware of my reasons for saying no.
Yeah.
And what I was saying earlier was that if your default setting has become no because of prep, then evaluate that. Take a moment when something's proposed to you to think about whether you might actually enjoy doing that. And there's no need to be anxious about going out and eating food because nobody's going to make you eat like an asshole.
Yeah.
There's no pressure to do that. Why don't you get this off the menu? No, I think I'll order this. Why are you eating that? I want that. Right. Sometimes we're going to have these conversations. And that's normal anyway. People like to give you suggestions and sometimes they're trying to understand. You feel pressurized to explain it. I don't. What you having this, you know, like
People do get used to it. They get used to it.
You can go out in prep. You can live a majority of a normal life in prep, in off season. It's all about having the right behaviors and the right relationship with food to begin with. But if that's fucked before you go into a deficit, it's only going to get worse. And then it's not going to be corrected when you move into off season. It's one of the best things that you can do prior to prep. We had a short period of time to fix your food behaviors before we prepped, but they carried through 8 weeks of intensive work on learning to eat well. That carried over into prep. It carries over into all of your food choices now, how you compose meals. You know, you've made it your own. You continue to work and build out and introduce more variety and try new things. You actively challenge yourself. So that foundational work is critical. So if you want to have a normal social life and not having anxiety around things like that, yeah. But if people are pressurizing you to do things that aren't within your value set, then never do them. You need the strength to say no and understand that that might be part of your journey from leaving one tribe and joining another, because the tribe that you want to be in will not ask you to do things that you don't want to do. They'll just support you because their values are the same.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really nice way to look at it. And I have to say, you know, as I always do, thank you for what you've done for me. But reflecting on that is something we actually talk about, isn't it? You know, what we did there, I think it was over like maybe 8 weeks before starting the prep. So much value in that because we pretty much rewrote my whole dialogue around food in that time of that would have been like over 11 years worth of this, like, because of my capacity, I can eat. And, you know, I was easily led at periods of time. I'm happy to admit that. And I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be the girl that could eat more than the boys because I can. And, you know, it was really tough. But I think as well, the big overriding factor there is that you supported me and you cared about me as a person. And this is what people, I think, should have in their coach.
Yeah, you can't coach if you don't give a fuck. It's got to be like the people that you work with have to be a priority for you, like their wellness and their happiness and their well-being. And if you haven't figured out how to get that out of different people in different circumstances, and sometimes you'll find somebody new and you're still figuring things out with them, but like if you've got that intention there to help and that you've kept up with your learning and your knowledge, then you're probably going to help them. That's got to be there. If you don't give a fuck, then yeah, it won't be a good outcome for them. You might get a good result in terms of a stage look with somebody once, you know, but I don't get a lot of drop off with my clients. You know, I see people working with different coaches, but I don't have a lot of drop off with my clients, and I think that's because by putting their kind of wellness, well-being, happiness as like the priority of every check-in, I think that becomes more important than chasing extreme physique goals. And what's nice is that when you're focusing on all of those foundations, guess what comes easiest?
A physique.
The gains.
Yeah, for sure. Life gains as well. Remember, guys, bodybuilding, as me and Tom agree, you know, we're talking about difficult subjects on this pod, but what an opportunity to be able to do something within your own, you know, your learning skills, and it's your own effort that then arrives you at different physique stages and the learning that can occur. And it's such a gift, but you are human, and you know, you can't expect yourself to be a robot all the time. And if you do fall into that trap, right back at the start I said about autonomy, it can fuck you pretty hard, because it's then hard to have a life outside of being a bodybuilder, and remembering who you are and what your value set is as a person, transferring into bodybuilding and presenting a better physique, right?
Yeah. Maybe also who you want to be as a person.
Yeah.
That drives growth, doesn't it? Yeah, very interesting stuff. The first competition is a huge learning curve. I mean, with a great coach, it can be navigated pretty smoothly. Without that, or doing it on your own, it'll be an absolute roller coaster. You'll learn a lot, but most of the things that you're going through are like normal. And if you speak up and you speak to the right person, if somebody writes into my DMs that they're struggling, I'm going to reply and I'm going to help them. I don't require money for that. You know, that's really simple stuff. So, like, you can reach out, you do have a voice, but if you get any identification from the kind of things that we're talking about and you're struggling, yeah, it's normal. Most everybody struggles, particularly after their first show, second show, that kind of thing. And it doesn't need to be that way.
I love that. What a summary. Now, on that note, of course, if people want to ask us questions, you know, we do actually message back. Although some people, it's super surreal for me when I message someone back and they're like, wow, you've sent me a message. I listened to your podcast. And I'm like, of course I've sent you a message. You know, it's really nice. And I love helping people like yourself. And, you know, I'm sure you're open to consults as well. So you can find Tom on Instagram, Thom Evans, and he's got Body Consultants as his company, doing coaching through that. So of course you've got your Instagram where people can reach out. But any messages, any shares on the story, if you enjoy this episode, please do it and go ahead, share the love.
Yeah, say like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. That might be for YouTube, but if there's a bell, fucking ring it. I don't care.
I love that. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.